The topic for today was scarcity versus abundance. And I think that a lot of folks basically will go after anything that moves. Whether you call it ideal customer profile or perfect prospect profile, or, a good fit versus a poor fit. I think people are constantly trying to make something happen when it may not be in anyone's interest to do so. So I'll just put that out there as a premise. Have you seen that? Do you see customers experiencing that? And do you have any feelings about why that's happening on an ongoing basis?
I see it all the time. So, yeah. And I'm guessing the reason, well, it depends on the situation. A lot of times it's confidence, right? You go after people who will talk to you. They may or may not be ideal or appropriate, but they'll talk to you. So you kind of go down that path. And then there are people who don't understand the process of sales in general, who, again, go in too low and have to swim upstream. And then people who just are willing to discount their prices because that's what someone asked.
There have been a few constants, but the one constant in terms of needs from the sellers, from the head of sales and from sales managers, what's the number one need? And it is always lead gen. Got to have more leads. Kathy, have you seen that over and over again?
Yeah, I do. I do see it, or it's I need more staff, or I just call it the mores, right? More technology, more leads, more staff, more presentation materials, another pocket folder, something.
Yep. This is actually dating myself by saying this, but one VP of sales once told me, having a seller say he's got enough leads is like Liz Taylor saying she's got enough diamonds. I think the mores is a good way to describe it. More, better, different. Whatever I have is not sufficient, and that's why I'm behind plan. Mm-hmm. And I think that really speaks to this notion of scarcity versus abundance. When people are calling upon, namely anybody who will talk to them, whether they're qualified or not, or not really clear on what the process is or whether they're even on a buying journey, but hey, they raise their hand, so let's have a conversation. If I'm giving them prices, if I throw enough stuff, maybe something will stick. Or if I start asking too many questions, maybe they'll push back on me. So I'm just going to start with what I already know are the values that we can add. All of those things are coming, in my opinion, from a position of lack, of either weakness or scarcity or fear, rather than abundance. And as a result, if people are being hounded, you've got to make more calls, you've got to get more opportunities into the funnel. Whatever rule of thumb they're operating by, 3x or 4x in their pipeline to make quota. People will just stuff anything in because, that's what they're being measured on. And then you wind up dragging these things along, hoping against hope that something's going to turn into business. The problem with that is, number one, if it wasn't a good fit to begin with, it probably isn't going to be a good fit at the end. You're just going to spend a lot of energy, a lot of cycles, a lot of calories getting it to the point where somebody will finally say no. That's expensive. But what's really expensive is the opportunity cost of good business that's out there that you're not talking to, not identifying, and not going after while you continue to drag these things along. I'm wondering if either of you have experience with that or agree with that.
1000% agree.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
Well, so the other thing that I think happens, and I'll just speak from my own experience because I've been selling for a long time, but when I was in high school, we used to talk about cutting somebody down, either being sarcastic or mean girls or whatever the current expression is. And I remember like 2 or 3 days later, I'd be saying, oh man, what I should have said was, it's like, Bear, you're way late on this. Jim Dickey, he's like this, he's always got a quick retort, but I would think of like the perfect thing to say a couple of days later, and it's like, dude, let it go, man. It's over. And I think I carried that with me into sales for a long time. And I think a lot of folks labor under that same misconception, which is if I'd only thought of the right thing to say, if I'd only been a little more on top of my game or a little quicker, I could have turned them around. I could have moved this forward. And what is underlying that is not just sort of beating yourself up or maybe letting yourself off the hook because you weren't that glib that day. But what's also underlying that is that a good salesperson should be able to sell anything to anybody. A good seller can always close the deal. And I think that's just, not only do I think it's not accurate, but I think it's ego driven. And the sooner you can set that aside, the better. And I think this notion of coming from scarcity to begin with, and then having this misconception that, I could talk the birds out of the tree or sell snow to Eskimos or whatever. I think that's a deadly pairing and one of the reasons that salespeople are unpopular. One company we worked with, they actually had a name for it. They called it white coat and black hat. So the SE was the guy in the white lab coat and very scientific, and the seller was the renegade outlaw cowboy in a black hat that the gunslinger that you could never trust, could never turn your back on. And all of these myths and images and goofy expressions, they're kind of funny, but they're not particularly helpful. And I think they're less and less helpful going forward because people don't have time for it. They don't want to hear it. Just net it out, all of that.
And that, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Kathy.
I think more and more and more, because so much information is out there, people can find their own intel, that when they talk to someone, they want the technical guy or the person who truly can answer these questions, and sometimes they may be the salesperson, but quite often not enough, honestly. And so they just think, well, you're going to waste my time. I really want to talk to John, but I got to get through you, and that irritates me. So if I can get through a John without going through you, that's what I'm going to do.
Yep.
Yeah. And if I could add, my perspective there quickly, I've seen some of the large companies and small as well. There's this whole notion of control, right? Salespeople are, to some of the points that Kathy mentioned, salespeople want to have complete control, and they would have some kind of a mental algorithm or rule saying we only need to touch upon the 2 or 3 features that customers have shown interest in. And some of that might be valid, but that I think is a lot of the time taken to the extreme where they are shutting out all the information and therefore hurting the credibility because it's not transparent anymore. And it's literally them following their own playbook to a large extent. Right?
Yep. Yes, I think the notion of control I don't want anybody talking to this account without talking to me first. Uh, the sense of ownership that I own this account, and nobody can go there without my permission. All of those things are, again, I sound like I'm just beating on the same drum, but are fear based. And I'll go back to where we started. My favorite topic is win-win. And one of the best definitions I've heard of win-win is holding tight with open arms. It's, being open to and inclusionary rather than controlling and exclusionary. It's really night and day. And I think when people finally get that there's plenty, well, one of two things happen. There's plenty out there, and your job is to go out and find it and have these kinds of open-armed, welcoming, inclusionary conversations. Or there actually isn't much of it out there, and you're out of the market, and you can go find the next thing that you should be doing. But trying to hold everything close and hold everything tight and control everything really isn't changing the market conditions at all. It's just making you hard to do business with. I think the technology and in many ways, the whole conversation, in my view, has been hijacked by solution providers, technology providers, is here's the playbook. And you may not know the right thing to say at this moment, but our playbook, and now our AI-enabled playbook, absolutely knows the right thing to say here. So just go with the online coaching, the real-time in-call conversation analysis, and say these words next, and you'll be all set. And I think many people think that's the answer, and I don't. That assumes A, that people are purely rational, which they're not, and B, that our process is purely correct and that all sales follow the same path, which we know is not true. So, Kathy, I could see it on both sides. On the one hand, I think they are open to it, and at the same time, I think they're being provided tools that kind of shut that whole thing down and say, just follow the playbook.
Well, and I experienced that this week. We had a
Really?
call with one of my clients is looking to see about signing up with a company to get information on people. And that's a $30,000 a year subscription, right? So it's not chunk change. And so they do the pre-qual. The guy calls me up, asks me questions. I'm like, boink, 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 boink. We get on the video call with the other guy, and he asked me like 3 of the same questions. And I'm like, why? What was the point of that, right? I already answered that. This is what I want to know. And I sent an email ahead of time. I got 30 minutes. I need this, 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 and this. And then we spent the first 15 minutes of him going through his script about building rapport and what business and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't need any of that. This is what I need. And then they couldn't answer. Then we asked, so then at the end he goes, well, when can we, he was going to send a proposal over with the information that we asked for because it wasn't in there. And he says, well, when can we get back together? I'm like, well, when are you going to send the report or the analysis? And so it was just this complete disconnect of him understanding what I needed and how he could help us. He was just going through a checklist. And I think that is technology because he was, a young kid.
Yeah, I think whether or not they have scripts, I think they certainly have checklists that they go through. I was recently just asked by someone what I thought about a new application where people can rehearse their presentations and get feedback, and it's recorded and their managers can review it. And there are a couple of other apps where the technology will review it and mark, whether you sound pedantic or, welcoming or when did you touch on these words, these keywords and so on. And I think what you wanted was an authentic conversation. I think what you wanted was to communicate with another person and get some, to use Raji's word, some communication going here. And I don't think all of these technologies are necessarily helping that unless that's how people want to be communicated with. So Rajiv, you've been around, inside sales and call centers and all of that. Do you see it getting better as the technology evolves?
So I think there's definitely an opportunity, but I think as we know, it's the people process technology. The process have to change, but most importantly, people have to recognize what technology is capable of and what technology can kind of deliver on, but not quite, because I think there's still miles and miles technology has to progress before it can start to even compare with what humans can deliver, right? So I think there's long ways to go. People talk about AI and ML and this and that, but know that, every time, and we've all seen like Google's demo of how call center employee can really connect with you. Imagine the gazillions of hours they would have put into it. It was a very narrow use case. So for you to turn it on for one of your customers who just called you, called your system, it's not happening anytime soon, in my assessment. So I think the best role technology can play today is in an assisting role where it's really good at automation. So once you figured out what the key items are, and they need to be automated, they're already sort of in a stacked and sitting somewhere to be operated upon. Technology can be great at that. It's a automation, just like robotic automation. The other one is giving you some hints and signals as to where to look, right? Because as Google has told us, Google answer is not perfect, but they give you a great point to get started with, right? Best Thai food to eat in Manhattan. You can type it in, and then you go in there, and you have a subset of 15 candidates that Google presented to you, and then you can apply your human skill to know what's the best place to go to. Because who knows? It's about reviews. And technology is simply foolishly almost collating all of that and presenting to you. But the last mile of analysis must come from, I think, right now and for a long time, from the human being.
It's always that last bit.
Yeah.
In networks, we did a lot of work with Corning and their fiber optics group, and they would have these fabulous networks, but then it's the last mile, getting from this final node into the house. And when you talk about solutions, software solutions, or software as a service, and they say, well, it's 80% out of the box. Yeah, but it's that final 20% that is where all the heavy lifting is, and where the nuance and meaning are found.
And we can go back to cooking, right? I mean, cooking, it's been around for gazillions of years, obviously, and it's a huge market, and I'm sure everybody has huge incentive to automate it and apply AI ML to it. But when your mom or your loved one, whoever makes that dish, one deviation of the step, adding that extra pinch of salt at the right time or the wrong moment, makes all the difference, right? And I don't know anything else. Like there's Instant Pot, right? It can do a bunch of things very well, but it can only provide a base platform upon which you need to now add your own ingenuity to really come out as a perfect dish, right?
Wow. I think I've got my next topic I want to do for a video from that. So one of the things they're doing right now with technology in food is 3D printing food.
Yeah.
And one of the ones they're doing is with chocolate, where they're actually creating a thing inside, a ball inside a cube that you can, and it's 3D printed. It'd be impossible to hand make, but you can print it.
Yeah.
Layer by layer. Versus like Water for Chocolate, where the whole thing was putting love into it, not technology, love. I think I can do a video on this.
That'd be great. Yeah.
And I think it applies. I mean, there's certainly a place for technology.
Yeah, and see
And
the carving out of chocolate into specific shapes, that technology can do very well because that's sort of automation, right? But creating the right chocolate, like given consistency and the taste and all that, that's where the magic is. And same thing for sales conversation. You can drop emails, you can package videos. Technology is very good at doing all of that. But the actual content that will evoke emotions in the recipient, right? Generate that emotional bond with with the person who's consuming that content. That's where the magic lies.
I think sometimes what's missing is that last, maybe it's the last 100 yards where the rep is actually connecting
Yeah.
what he or she heard on the call or was feeling on the call with, what options are being served up for me to send out. So I think that would be useful. What would be a good way to wrap this up, Kath? We've got a few minutes left. I've talked about scarcity and abundance. When you go back and watch the video, you'll see one of the quotes Einstein is credited with is saying, the most important question you can answer is, do you believe the universe is friendly? And how you answer that question really colors everything, how you approach life. And I would paraphrase that and say, do you think the universe is abundant? And it's clear that it is. I mean, it's just outrageously abundant. And I'm not going to get into how many billions of stars there are, but just a guy that I used to listen to way back when, pre-Tony Robbins. In fact, he was Tony Robbins' mentor and instructor, was a guy named Jim Rohn. And Jim had grown up in the Midwest, so he had all these sort of classic farming and down-to-earth examples, and one of them was planting corn. And he said, you never lose your seed corn. You always have your cup of seed corn. You never give up. And he said, but here's what's great about it. You plant a cup of corn, you don't get a cup back. You get bushels back. If you just got a cup back, you might as well just keep the cup you started with. But, the universe is like outrageously abundant. You plant a cup and you get an acre, And I think that's true in all areas, in all of our endeavors. If we put good seed out there, the return is massive. It is massively abundant. And I think that's really believing that, and B, having the courage and compassion, which is the other thing I talk about in the video, to operate from that place and tell your manager, when enough is enough, or when it's not feeling right. And maybe it isn't enough, but it's also not feeling right. I think having the courage to say so is really the key to playing win-win on a long-term basis, which is where we started.
And I guess it'd be like, for me, when I work with, we have a little course where we're teaching new business people how to be business people, right? And targeting specifically at this point to graphic designers, right? Want to go out and start a graphic design business. And so one of the things I see, because I did it, was, again, you go out and you aim low to avoid disappointment, right? And so I always say, to build your confidence, you do it with knowledge, right? Either you're going to know something about the client, the industry, something is what's going to help you get more confident. Take the focus off of you, put it on them. So what are some of the other ways that you guys do that? How do you help people get out of that lack mentality and that low confidence?
I think that's a great way of taking the emphasis off of us and putting it on the buyer. One of the things, again, kind of going back to ego, a thing that I learned a long time ago is I haven't really sold anything to anybody for a long time, but I've helped a lot of people buy stuff, and they've actually bought a lot of stuff from me over the years. And once you get past, the idea that you're going to close somebody or smash somebody or whatever, drive this thing across the goal line. And instead, as you're suggesting, put the emphasis on the buyer and what they're trying to accomplish and why they need to do it. I think that invites all these things, doing some research on their company, doing some research on them, and all of that. So much of, not all of it, but so much of that is available. But, there are tons of programs, applications out there now that plus all of the social stuff that you can pick up essentially for free. You just start following somebody and you can, if they're posting anything, you'll find out about it. So I think there are lots of ways to get at that. If, and this is the big if, Kathy, is if somebody is interested and willing to do that. So what would be, what thing can I offer to either of you to help your business on our way out here? What would be useful for you, Kathy, today?
Well, probably what are the most usable? I mean, I know AI is passion of yours. What's the most usable way to use it in a marketing and sales environment?
Let's start with AI. A lot of things that are being called artificial intelligence really aren't. They're just business rules that are being applied to things. The number one thing to know about artificial intelligence and machine learning is you need massive amounts of data for these things to learn and grow and be effective. And most small companies don't have anything like the volume needed to actually learn something. For example, Tesla, now all of the cars that they've sold for all of the time they've been in business are streaming data back to Tesla. Tesla has billions of miles of data that they are using to improve their software's decision-making ability as far as self-driving. And they're applying artificial intelligence to do that. One of the things that has changed, which has made artificial AI-enabled solutions more available to individuals and to small companies, small and medium-sized companies, is third-party data and third-party providers, where they're aggregating huge volumes of data, and then you can access that with some of these apps. But the number one thing to know is you need tons and tons of data for machine learning and AI to be effective. So I would say, Kathy, and answer your question, which do you start with? I would see if there are, for the markets you're going after or the profiles you're going after, if there is data out there on them that are feeding these apps that you're looking at. Rajiv, do you have anything you would add to that?
Yeah, so I think there are sort of maybe at least three, maybe more building blocks, right, for any business. They need a very specific view of the terrain of the landscape they are in. So that I think there are approaches in AI ML you can apply to sift through the data and figure out who the best opportunities or the prospects are to focus on. So that's one. The other one is your own workflow as to, once a lead comes in, what are the various steps that you are going to take that lead through fruition? And third one is, how you are serving them. So those are, I think, the three areas. And I think there are bits and pieces of technology that are available to improve upon each of those three areas. And like Barry said, it's going to be all about data, and the value that's provided by some third-party data or some other report is going to be, I mean, it'll provide some benefits, but I think there will be marginal benefits. So I would contend that the data that's really relevant to you and you own and you worry about, that you should have a very strong handle on, and make sure that's always available, because AI tools are not that expensive. They can easily operate on the data that you have, right? So I think that's going to be the big difference between the winners and losers, I think, over the next decade or so, because people who understand the data and have ownership of their own data, that information can be projected to really figure out what the right markets are to focus on. Are we selling our is our sales process on track, and is our customer success process on track?
And what was the third one?
Customer success, right? So once you've signed the deal, and now with SaaS and everything, people are just like used to be with airline business, right? Now software companies are also in that 360-degree view kind of selling, where when we are serving them, we are also creating a certain sense of credibility or quality that the customer is going to base their next decision on. So sales is going to, and I think Barry may have shared this with you, at Cisco WebEx, 70 to 80% of our revenue came from installed base, which is probably true for most companies. So serving is the best form of selling, right? Serving well is the best form of selling.
If you go to salesmastery.com, come to our homepage, and right up here at the top, you see videos. If you click on that, it will bring you to this page. And there are actually pages and pages of videos. I think we've got 30 plus videos now. And there are things in the general category. If you click on this window, or the sales math category, if you click on this one, AI for sales is another category that we have. And then we have something for sales managers here. And so each of these is sort of useful, I think. And if we go to general, so here's the one we were talking about today, Kathy. It's on the first page. Win-win part 4, scarcity versus abundance. You can just click on that. And if you go to the general, if you click on that instead, you'll see all 4 parts of the win-win video. So along with some other things. So here's win-win part 1, 2, 3, and 4.
So are you going to be doing this on a monthly basis?
The content is up there all the time, and we're adding to it all the time, either stuff for managers or sales math, or one of the ones we just recently added was on becoming a commodity and what that means. So we have all kinds of things. The thing I was saying to Rajiv before we got started is, Jim and I have been at this for over 35 years, and we have a lot of stuff in our heads, and we have no need to take it to our graves with us. We want to. There's a lot that is changing in sales, and that's the research we're doing and the conversations we're having. And there is a tremendous amount of interpersonal communication and skills that are not changing, and those are the kinds of things that we're putting on our videos. So, and then office hours we do every month. Starting next month, it'll be second Thursday. So same time, second Thursday versus. So.
Okay, so.
And the registration form will have a video for you to watch again. Next month, we're talking about reinforcing training. And when you register, it will have a link to the video. So thanks for your time today. Appreciate you joining us.